benefits from that, not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, we'll have the very latest on the Israel-Hamas situation. Rishi Sunak, of course, has been speaking out in Parliament today. There's also going to be a big protest in round about half an hour outside of the BBC, so we'll be crossing live and taking a look at what's going on there. Also, back to this country, prisons. We know by now, don't we, that they are overcrowded. My solution? Simple. Build some more then. But our Justice Secretary has some other radical ideas. How about keeping low-level criminals out of prison, he suggests. Get them into the community. Get them doing some work. Really? Would you support that? Is that how we fix crime in this country? I don't think so, but maybe you do. And also news which will not surprise pretty much anyone. According to experts, net migration to the UK is unlikely to fall below pre-Brexit levels for years to come. Have we lost control of immigration? Did we even have control in the first place? We've got all of that to come and more. But before we get into it, let's grab tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom is that the US Secretary of State has been in Israel today. He's been holding talks with senior leaders over how to get aid into Gaza. Antony Blinken's visit comes as doctors struggle to help rising numbers of patients, including children injured in airstrikes. The United Nations is warning the humanitarian situation on the Gaza Strip is deteriorating quickly. Hospitals are running short on medicines and fuel, with only the most serious cases able to receive vital treatment. And the Prime Minister's confirmed in the House of Commons this afternoon that at least 6 British citizens were killed in Hamas's attack on Israel and a further 10 are missing. Earlier MPs and peers observed a minute's silence, with the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, saying the whole House is shocked by the recent terrorist attack on Israel by Hamas. Rishi Sunak told the Chamber he unequivocally supports both British Jews and Muslims. He also announced an extra £10 million in humanitarian aid for Gaza, saying the Palestinian people are victims of Hamas too. Addressing the British Jewish community directly, the Prime Minister said the government's doing everything it can to protect them.
We stand with you now and always. This atrocity was an existential strike at the very idea of Israel as a safe homeland for the Jewish people. I understand why it has shaken you to your core, and I am sickened that anti-Semitic incidents have increased since the attack. We are doing everything that we can to protect you.
Well, the Prime Minister visited a Jewish secondary school in North London this morning, reassuring students his government will always support them. He also said he's working with Israel to minimise the war's impact on civilians. Meanwhile, Egypt is under pressure today to open the Rafah crossing. It was due to open first thing this morning. It sits on the south of the Gaza Strip on its border with Israel, and calls are being made for the safe passage of humanitarian aid along with the evacuation of foreign nationals from the area across the Rafah crossing. Israel says nearly 200 hostages are being held in the area by the terrorist group. And Gaza's health ministry says more than 2,800 Palestinians have been killed since the 7th of October, with nearly 11,000 wounded by Israeli airstrikes. Israeli military forces outside Gaza continue to prepare for their ground offensive. The country's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, vowing at the weekend to demolish Hamas. And the US President Joe Biden saying he's confident Israel will act within the rules of war, but added there must be a path to a Palestinian state. Here in the UK, a man once suspected of being part of an Islamic State death squad known as the Beatles has pleaded guilty to terrorism charges. Aina Leslie Davis appeared via video link from Belmarsh prison and admitted possessing a firearm for terrorism purposes and 2 counts of funding terrorism. He'll be sentenced next month. A Conservative MP accused of bullying and sexual misconduct is facing suspension. A parliamentary panel found that Peter Bone committed varied acts of bullying and an act of sexual misconduct against a member of his staff in 2012 and 2013. The panel is recommended he be suspended for 6 weeks, a move that could trigger a recall petition and another possible by-election. A member for Wellingborough denies the allegations, describing them as factually false. Now, the Foreign Secretary is in Albania to help tackle illegal migration. James Cleverly's been attending the annual Berlin Process Summit in Tirana, along with Western Balkan and European leaders. He's expected to look for cooperation on the movement of migrants as the government works to stop small boats crossing the channel. Experts believe net migration to the UK is unlikely to drop below 250,000 a year by the end of the decade. Net migration stood at 606,000 last year, with the war in Ukraine and arrivals from Hong Kong contributing to numbers. But the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford and the London School of Economics say going forward, the figure will be largely driven by international students. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, hello, everybody. I've missed you whilst I have been away. And what a week it has been. Horrendous stuff going on the world over, so it seems. Delighted to have a new face to my panel to help dissect and debate some of the goings-on. Matthew Goodwin is a Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent. And Joe Phillips, a political commentator. Also from Kent.
Exactly. We probably came on the same train but didn't see each other.
You didn't know each other. You were strangers on the way in, but
on a
perhaps
train.
not on the way home.
Lord.
Yes, there you go. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It is not just about us three. It's very much about you guys and how I have missed talking to you over this last week. So do get your thoughts and your feelings coming in on the email, if that's your thing. gbviews@gbnews.com is how you reach me, or Twitter or X or whatever it is, at GB News. Now, of course, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, he has been busy speaking in Parliament this afternoon. He's reiterated, of course, the UK's condemnation of the Hamas attack, and he says that more than 1,400 people were murdered by Hamas, with Brits, very sadly, unfortunately, among those killed. Let's have a listen.
With a heavy heart, I can inform the House that at least 6 British citizens were killed. A further 10 are missing, some of whom are feared to be among the dead.
Yeah, so the plan for this show, I was then going to move seamlessly over to Tel Aviv to bring you Charlie Peters, who you'll be familiar with by now, I'm sure, is out there. He was going to bring us up to date on all the latest goings-on of the day. Unfortunately, we've got wind that he has been moved into a shelter as we speak. So instead, I will bring my panel straight in. And that just kind of, you know, brings it home to me. I mean, literally, we're due to talk to people and just gone, hopefully to their safety. Yeah. You know, this is just non-stop now. You know, I was away on holiday last week, and I'm not ashamed to admit that this put a real dampener on the holiday thinking. I just couldn't get it out of my head, no matter how much I tried. Right, come on, just try and switch off. I just can't get the imagery, the horrendous imagery, a lot of which I wish that I hadn't actually seen, I must confess, cannot get it out of my mind. And for me, this feels like it's getting much worse as the days go on, as opposed to much better. Yeah. What do you make to it all?
Well, I think firstly, let's hope Charlie's okay. He's a great journalist and a brave journalist at that. I think what we've seen in Britain over the last week, I found quite troubling and quite depressing. I I've tried to put myself in the shoes of Britain's Jewish community and communities and try and think about how I would perceive these events of the last week. And I would be, I think, quite shaken by seeing the way in which some of our national institutions have responded. We've seen the BBC refuse to refer to Hamas as terrorists. I know we're going to talk about that later on.
We are indeed. You've just provided a good segue, but just hold that thought, because you're quite right. We will be touching on the BBC probably in about, I think that process is due at about 6:30, so we'll be crossing to there, see what's going on. But for now, I've just got word. I've just got word apparently that Charlie Peters is available to join us. I thought he was ready and poised, but I've just been told he just needs a couple more minutes.
Well, let me babble on for a minute more until we get to Charlie. We've also seen Wembley Stadium, an important symbol of the national community, refused to show the colours of Israel, yet it showed the colours of Belgium, France, Ukraine, Turkey, even the rainbow flag in solidarity.
But you see, I'm about to I'll voice an unpopular opinion to that. I've not had my 10 pence worth on this because I was away. I actually don't think that football should have been getting involved in any of those societal issues as the histories have gone by. And I think now it's put itself in an awkward position, as you say, when it comes to that Wembley Arch. My view is that you should have stayed out of politics and societal issues and just focused on football in the first place.
Sure, but I mean, it didn't. It took a conscious decision to get involved in things like that and Black Lives Matter and so forth. So for many British Jews, I think what they see is an imbalanced approach. They see an asymmetry in how we're responding to these events. And I've been, as I say, quite shaken by the way in which very few organisations that you would expect to speak out about these atrocities have remained eerily quiet. Universities fell over themselves to demonstrate solidarity with George Floyd, have said very little at all. The British Muslim organisations have not been particularly outspoken. Many organisations on the left of politics, Labour MPs and others, have not been actually as outspoken as you would ordinarily suggest.
Why do you think that is?
I think that's a bit unfair, Matt, actually. I mean, you have seen this afternoon a pretty united House of Commons.
Right, hang on.
I've seen Labour MPs saying some pretty unsavoury things.
On that moment of uniting, I just want to bring in Charlie, because I don't know how long I've got him for, so I'm really sorry to interrupt, but just let me cross live to Tel Aviv to Charlie Peters. Good evening. Charlie, just bring us up to speed with the latest goings-on, if you will.
Sure, well, it's been a strange day in Tel Aviv and indeed throughout Israel as news broke this morning of a potential opening of the Rafah crossing from Gaza into Egypt amid that dire humanitarian situation. Those hopes were then dashed. They were renewed a few hours later when a US spokesperson told reporters in Cairo that there might be an opportunity for it to open this afternoon, but that's not happened. We've not had any reports of that successfully happening. Indeed, the activity we've seen on the Rafah crossing this evening is shelling. 2 shells landing near the entrance from the Gaza side into Egypt. In the north, we've seen an escalation of the conflict between Lebanese Hezbollah, that Iran-backed military force in the north coming in from South Lebanon. Skirmishes there escalating beyond small arms fire and shelling into rocket attacks and missile attacks targeted on Israeli outposts, and the Israelis responding in kind with helicopter gunships and artillery shelling of their own. This afternoon, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Iran, don't get involved. We are watching you. Do not do this. He offered a very firm rebuke to any potential involvement of Iranian proxies there getting worse as that situation escalates. Israel, IDF commanders say they are ready to fight on 2 fronts, but they are preparing for that invasion of the Gaza Strip in the south and maintaining both that invasion, their first since 2014, amid the worst violence this country has seen for 50 years, while also defending themselves from not only the Iranian proxies in South Lebanon, but also troops on the Syrian border and on the Golan Heights would be a significant challenge. At the same time today, we have seen a flaring of tensions in the West Bank. Amid all the chaos across the country, people have quietly missed the fact that this has been the deadliest week on record since the UN started counting in the West Bank. Over 50 people have been killed there as violence and disruption continues. This morning, the IDF announced that they had arrested hundreds of people overnight and captured all sorts of weapons and ammunition in that region. That is going to be a conflict zone to watch in the coming days. But the overall picture, the situation in general, is one of chaos. A grave humanitarian situation on the Gaza Strip as the Israelis hope that civilians will move from the north to the south so that they can prepare for that land invasion in the north and in the northern territories on the border with southern Lebanon. A hottening of that situation, Israeli soldiers dying, Lebanese Hezbollah being hit by missiles. It's looking extremely precarious indeed.
Charlie Peters, thank you for what you're doing over there, and do stay safe. I apologise I interrupted
That's
you.
all right. I mean, I was just making the point, you know, Matt wanted to pick on some Labour MPs who have not condemned Israel. I don't know who they are, whether you want to name them, but what we have seen, by and large, since the atrocities a week ago, was absolute solidarity across Labour and Tories. And I think there's been absolute and quite right condemnation of Hamas. We have also seen Tory MPs, Crispin Blunt, for instance, asking, and quite rightly, again, in my view, that we reiterate attempts to pressurise Israel to be mindful of the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in Gaza. And in the last half an hour or so, just before we came on air, we've seen very nasty warnings coming out of Iran. We've seen Antony Blinken, the American Secretary of State, not now going back to America, as had been planned, but going on to Amman in Jordan. And I didn't realise, to my shame and ignorance, that because of the impasse that is happening in Washington, America doesn't actually have an ambassador to Israel at the moment, nor does it have anybody in charge of counter-terrorism within the Middle East, because they're stuck in their own sort of stagnated state in the Senate. So, you know, this is got wider ramifications than what is happening in Britain. This has got the possibility of bringing people in from around the region and coming into a full-scale war. But, you know, at the heart of this...
Well, when you say full-scale war, what do you mean? Because I think that it's important that we tie it, because there's so many people right now that are frightened. There's a lot of stuff going around on social media and places like that that's not perhaps as accurate as
I'm
it
sure,
should be.
absolutely.
And I think people are so terrified that when we sit from the comfort of a desk going, oh, yeah, we're about to head to a war, like, really?
No, I think that's a very fair point, Michelle, absolutely. And I think people, particularly younger people as well, feel very frightened, quite understandably, about what could happen. But I think, you know, we know that the Middle East has always been very precarious, and it's a tinderbox. But what we are seeing is potential involvement of Iran, the involvement that we've already seen between Russia and Syria. You've then got, you know, what is Putin making of all of this, rubbing his hands with glee while we're not concentrating on Ukraine or the Balkans. And there will be an impact. But, you know, what we have to remember is at the heart of this, the real people who are suffering are Israelis and Palestinians on both sides, innocent people.
Let me bring in one of those people, actually, because joining me down the line now is really Australian citizen Ronit. She joins me down the line now. She was brought from Israel to London, actually, by the Australian government. And this is a very interesting conversation, because a lot of people have been quite critical of the UK government here, saying that perhaps, or questioning, are we moving fast enough to get people out of Israel? So I'm interested in your perspective on it. You were brought, as I just mentioned, by Australia, essentially, to London. What was it like there whilst you were waiting, essentially, to be rescued from that war zone?
Well, I wasn't actually waiting to be rescued. My decision was a very last-minute decision. I actually didn't want to leave Israel. Just to give a summary of how my experience since the attacks, I've been feeling high anxiety, fear, fury, anger. We've had thousands and thousands of rockets fired onto us, and that's just the beginning. Deep sorrow and pain and sadness. I have no words to describe the sorrow and sadness for our innocent Israeli citizens who have been murdered, who have been slaughtered, butchered, who have been raped, who have been burnt alive, who have been executed. They took hostages. Hamas has taken hostages. It now lies at about 200 hostages. They torture the hostages, mutilate babies, mutilating people, executing the hostages, beheading babies and innocent people, dragging people through the streets naked. And it doesn't end there. Posting these things on social media, posting their murders of families and slaughter and butchering. And it's incomprehensible. I have no word to describe what is going on at the moment. Posting it to social media and posting it to people's Facebook profiles for their families to see them murdered and butchered. I mean, I wonder again and again, what would England or Australia or any other country do if this was happening to them? So I've just been feeling extremely angry and in pain, like heartbroken, like many of us around the world. In Israel, you don't have to be Israeli or Jewish to be heartbroken or outraged. You just have to be a human being. It's been a terribly difficult week, and my heart is in Israel. That's all I can think about, these poor people. Hamas is ISIS, and the world needs to understand that. They kill every being, everything that's living, they kill. Even the family, even, when they came and murdered families in their homes and destroyed their homes and slaughtered them and butchered them in front of their families, they also murdered pets, dogs, cats, anything in sight. Hamas is ISIS. The world needs to understand that.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear of your experience, but we thank you for sharing it with us, and we hope that your loved ones remain as safe as is possible. But for now, thank you very much for your time. Now, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to bring you guys into the conversation, as well as a little bit more from my panel also as well. There's a protest about to begin imminently outside of the BBC. Have you seen some of the goings on there? What do you make to it all? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you.
every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other pay-per-review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, GBViews at gbnews.com. That made no sense whatsoever. I'm saying alongside me, an email address. What I meant to say was you two fabulous people are alongside me.
We are an email address.
But also, it's not just about us three. It's about you guys at home as well. That's what I was trying to say. So you can tell that I'm still a little bit in holiday mode. GBViews at gbnews.com is how you get hold of me tonight. Matt, you went viral, actually, this afternoon, speaking on the BBC. We're going to be crossing live there in a second because there's a protest gearing up, getting ready to go. What do you think about the BBC's handling of this situation?
I don't think it's been great. I think the refusal to refer to Hamas as a terrorist organisation, a group that is prescribed by the state for being a terrorist organisation, a group that 66% of all voters in this country think is a terrorist organisation, which clearly, based on the actions last week, is a terrorist organisation. I don't think really that looks good at all. And actually, the BBC's claim that it doesn't describe groups as terrorist, it merely describes how other people describe those groups, is not true either. Footage has emerged today of the BBC's response to 9/11, where it was quite explicit in referring to some groups as terrorist organisations. And I think what concerns people within the British Jewish community in particular, I think, is this sense that when it comes to British Jews, there is a sort of a double standard that is applied, that they're not taken as seriously as other minority communities. And I was looking at the protests over the weekend in London, you know, where you had people chasing a man who was waving in his flag of Israel, threatening to beat him up and behead him. You had young women with paraglider badges on, which is glorifying terrorism. And I think many British Jews were looking at this and thinking, how on earth is this happening in Britain in 2023? And if that protest had been, you know, involving members of a far-right group or expressing support for any other form of extremism or tacit support for that form of extremism, we wouldn't have tolerated it for a second.
You see, I saw that the graphic that you're talking about, those girls that had the paragliding thing on their back, and I couldn't quite work out, has someone just gone up behind them and shoved that on their back? Did they know that that was on their back? Because
But don't forget, it came hours after Black Lives Matter put out a poster, the Chicago chapter of the paragliders.
But the point Michelle's making is they might not even have known that they were on their backs.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is I cannot comprehend that an individual would really seriously sit there and think it's a good thing that someone has paraglided into innocent people and slaughtered them. I can't get my head around anyone.
I don't think...
How do you struggle with that when so many people supported 9/11 in parts of the world? They were celebrating and clapping.
But
so let's not downplay it.
Surely not that brave. It's short to go out onto a London street in broad daylight, knowingly, with that sellotapes onto you. Maybe I'm just being a little bit too kind to people's mentalities, but...
I think there is a huge danger here, and I think because tensions are and have historically always been quite delicate. I mean, at the weekend, there was red paint thrown over the BBC at New Broadcasting House, apparently by a pro-Palestinian organisation claiming that their report was or reporting was biased. Tonight, there's the protest there organised by a Jewish group. So, you know, if you've got two groups saying you're getting your coverage wrong, then probably you're going right through the middle. I think many people find it difficult to understand because Hamas is a prescribed organisation in this country, so therefore it is illegal. I think that is one of the difficulties in the BBC's stance, but I completely appreciate that when they've got people out in the field, as you have with Charlie Peters, you need to be absolutely unbiased in order to have access, in order to come up with the impartial, proper reporting that is valued around the world.
But is stating facts bias? You tell me at home. I'm going to cross. We've been speaking about the BBC, so let's cross live. Our reporter, Theo Chikomba, he is live there now. Good evening to you, Theo. Oh. He hasn't. He was there, and now he's not. So I will show you some live shots there from outside. Oh, everything's gone as well. OK, that's not a problem. Yes, he was. We shall carry on the conversation here then anyway. So this is a protest that's been organised by the National Jewish Assembly, basically. And to the point we've just been discussing, they are accusing the BBC of this continued bias. And this, I mean, I did show you a clip just before the break. You can see that there is an awful lot of people now gathering. Tempers and emotions, of course, are running high. Now, you might have seen the coverage. I saw it whilst I was off. I think it was Sheffield Town Hall or something. Someone had put an Israeli flag, and then somebody had kind of scaled, took the Israeli flag down and replaced it with a Palestinian one. And I was watching that thinking, it didn't even feel real. I mean, I know it was real, but it didn't feel real. And this is what I'm saying. I don't know if I am just being a little bit too kind to the mindset of certain people, because I think to myself, and there is obviously a distinction between Hamas and your average Palestinian. I'm not trying to kind of merge them all as one. But in this day and age, how can you sit and feel that actually it's OK for me to side with, for whatever reasons, for whatever reason, whatever motivations, with people that are behaving in such a horrendous, awful, unimaginable way? And I just can't believe that it's happening. And I'll be interested to see whether or not there's any counter-protests to the one that's about to occur outside the BBC.
I'm not surprised it's happening at all. I mean, I heard the fireworks and the celebrating on Edgware Road in London in the aftermath of the attacks in Israel. We know from surveys that about between 2 and 6% of Britain's Muslim communities sympathise with Islamist terrorists. We know that from the surveys. The Community Security Trust this week has said there's been a 300% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the UK. And we know that British Jewish children are being told not to show symbols of their faith when they're walking to and from school. So the reality is we do have a problem with anti-Semitism in Britain, which I would argue is mainly coming from an assortment of far-left activists and radical Islamists who have a very warped view of Jews and of Israel and of Hamas. And so if we were upholding the British law, people who express sympathy for Hamas, like those two girls at the demonstration, if indeed they put the signs on themselves, they should be treated like supporters of ISIS. There's no fundamental difference between ISIS and Hamas. There is no fundamental difference.
And that has been made very clear by the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, that anybody who is supporting Hamas, the proscribed terror group, is breaking the law. That doesn't preclude you and shouldn't preclude you from supporting the Palestinian people, who are not all Hamas, and they shouldn't be lumped together. And there will be many people, you know, we've just seen several minutes given to a woman whose view of Israel was her own view. That's fine. There's no balance against that, unless you've got somebody coming up to talk to us from Gaza. But I think, you know, it is a very, very emotive topic for all sorts of very understandable reasons. But I think, you know, there has always been the difficulty that you can be, and in fact many people in Israel have been deeply, deeply opposed to Benjamin Netanyahu. And, you know, you could argue that actually because he had fractured democracy in the one democratic country in the Middle East, he was probably caught napping, which allowed the terrorists to attack. You know, that will never probably come out. But there has always been a problem, I think, for some people to think that they cannot criticise Israel and what Israel does for fear of being accused of being anti-Semitic.
Well, yeah, but that's a simple thing. For example, do you think Jeremy Corbyn, who is a former party leader of the Labour Party, a very prominent national politician, should he have come out after the attacks and unequivocally condemned Hamas?
He doesn't speak for the Labour Party, he speaks for himself.
But do you see the frustration that many British Jews would have?
Yes,
that here is a former leader of a mainstream party who could currently be Prime Minister if he'd won the last general election.
But that's ridiculous. That's whataboutery. You know,
no, it isn't. No, it isn't whataboutery.
He couldn't be Prime Minister because he lost the election. He's expelled from the Labour Party and he is no longer
What you're
leader.
saying, though, what you're saying is that these suggestions are fringe. And what I'm saying is
No,
they're
I'm
not.
not.
I'm saying anti-Semitism is still in the lifeblood of mainstream British society, and it should be Jeremy Corbyn
and Jeremy Corbyn did a
all
lot
of the other
damage to the
Corbynistas
Labour
who should be
Party,
condemning
which Keir
Hamas.
Starmer has dealt with swiftly and appropriately, and has been applauded by leading Jewish Labour MP Margaret Hodge and Luciana Berger, who, as you remember, left the Labour Party and joined the Liberal Democrats, and has now praised Keir Starmer for what he's done.
So Jeremy Corbyn should condemn Hamas.
Jeremy Corbyn is his own person. He doesn't speak for the Labour Party.
You don't think he should condemn?
Jeremy Corbyn does not speak for the Labour Party.
He's a Labour Party member, though, isn't he?
No, he's been expelled.
And
no,
if he
I
runs for
thought he
London-
was still in the party, but he'd lost the whip.
This is where I
No,
think
he's been expelled
This
from
is where
the
I think
Labour
the double
Party. He
standards
sits as an
come in.
independent. He may not even be. He won't be allowed to stand as a Labour Party candidate at the next election.
Well, look, there you go. Let
So
me
that's
know
a conversation to have with Jeremy
thoughts.
Corbyn.
Let me know your thoughts on it all. You know my email address by now, but I'll see you in 2.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Matthew Goodwin, the pollster and an academic alongside me, as is Joe Phillips, the political commentator. The conversation just continued in the break there about Jeremy Corbyn. I'm going to ask you, do you think his view is relevant? So very passionate feelings here from Matt, who feels that it's absolutely wrong that Corbyn will not basically condemn Hamas. Do you think that he should? Do you care about his opinion? Does it influence anything in this country? I'm interested in what you think specifically specifically on that, and I'll be bringing you in to the conversation, worry not. But as I've been alluding to, there is a protest happening outside the BBC. It's been organised by the National Jewish Assembly. Let's cross live to our correspondent there. Thea, good evening. Bring us up to speed with what's happening.
Yes, well, a very good evening to you. In the last 10 minutes or so, we've started hearing some speakers here at this protest outside Broadcasting House in central London. I don't know whether we can just show you just how many people are here. I'd say there's probably several hundred people here, perhaps into 1,000, who are here particularly about the issue of coverage, as we've seen in the last 10 days or so. One thing that people have been highlighting is the BBC's use of the word terrorist. While they haven't called the Hamas group a terrorist group, they've referred to it as a militant group at times. And in the last few days, we've heard some programmes attributing the term terrorist group to which has been prescribed by the UK government and indeed the EU and the US government as well. But the BBC has been clear on what they say is journalists should be able to tell the story without putting impartiality aside and having due impartiality as well when it comes to situations like this. But people have been saying, if you've used that word for other stories in the past, why is it any different this time? And we've spoken to some of those members of the Jewish community who are here as part of this protest. But in terms of what the BBC have said in a statement, they've said this: we always take our use of language very seriously. Anyone watching or listening to our coverage will hear the word terrorist used many times. We attribute it to those who are using it. For example, the UK government, and they say this is an approach that has been used for decades and is in line with other broadcasters. And they went on to say the BBC is an editorially independent broadcaster whose job it is to explain precisely what is happening on the ground so our audiences can make their own judgments. And it is on that point we've heard from senior BBC reporters who covered stories like this in the past, and they say particularly people should be able to make that distinction themselves rather than the journalist or the BBC as an organisation in the news department calling the Hamas group a terrorist organisation. And that is why several hundred people are here protesting that very fact this evening when it comes to the use of language.
Theo, thank you very much for that update. Do you think BBC will change their position or not?
I hope they do. I suspect at the senior level they realise now they're looking increasingly ridiculous and losing a lot of public trust. You only need to spend 2 minutes online to see the anger and frustration among many people at the BBC's positioning. And so over time, I think the kind of hypocrisy and double standards in all of this will bubble to the surface. We need a conversation about this issue, and we need a conversation that involves many of the people who perceive the double standards in our national life.
Yeah, indeed, and I want to bring you in, and I will do after the break on this one. Let me ask you this, and this is a sensitive thing, and I know that some people perhaps will be upset with my thoughts on this. Yes, I do this job, but primarily I'm a mummy. That is my key thing in life. I've got a little boy. And while I was watching all of this horrendous stuff unfolding whilst I was away on holiday, absolutely, of course, horrified by what Hamas did. Of course, nobody in their right mind would even try and defend that. It's indefensible. It's horrific. And I don't want to say the word but. However, when I saw then the promised response of essentially the deliberate starvation of children in the Gaza Strip, and then I saw people coming out saying, we unequivocally back Israel, we support them to defend their peoples, their land and all the rest of it, there was a part of me, and it was quite a big part, I will be honest, I was and remain very uncomfortable with this notion that children, there are 1 million or thereabouts, in the Gaza Strip will be deliberately starved and killed, obviously, innocent children as a result and as a response to this. What do you think to that?
Who's holding babies and children currently around rocket sites?
That's not the answer.
Hamas. Israel is the only advanced nation that gives as much warning ahead of attacks as it does. And Israel is the only country that is held up to a standard of warfare that is not applied to any other country in the world. Israel has every right to defend itself. There will always be casualties. Nobody's okay with that.
So do you think it's okay to give 24 hours notice for 1 million people, including people in babies in incubators, people in intensive care units, elderly people? There's no fuel, there's no water, there's no food. They are basically funneling those people and they've got no escape. And as Michelle says, those are children, they are elderly people, they are sick people. And Israel, actually, I would argue, it may have been criticised by the UN and other countries in the past. It has bombed refugee camps, you will remember, in the past, but it has very rarely been held accountable. And the language and the machismo, I think, I agree with you, Michelle, that I find it quite chilling that we will defend ourselves whatever the cost, when the cost is innocent people.
Do you know, the one question I would like to ask everybody who talks about a proportionate response, because we hear this a lot this week, Israel's response should be proportionate. I've yet to hear anybody set out on that side of the argument what that proportionate response would be. Should we ask Israel to kill exactly the same number of people that Hamas killed?
No, but you could ask them to have humanitarian corridors and give people the chance to escape.
Well, nobody, including Benjamin Netanyahu or anybody else, is saying the current situation is ideal. Nobody is saying that civilians dying in warfare, as unfortunately they've always done, is ideal. But from the perspective of Israel, and in terms of defending themselves and also trying to save as many of the 126 hostages as possible, Israel, I'm afraid, should be able to do whatever it needs to do to secure its own people.
Without any... See, I am not a military strategist, so I can't tell you, right, this would be my strategy to ensure proportionality. I'm just a mummy, and I sit there and I think, you know, I was on holiday, not too far in terms of the air, from Israel. My sky, for my little boy, was lit up by the strobes of the theatre show that he was going to enjoy. And I just sat and I just couldn't get my head around, over there, in the not too far away distance, the children there, their sky has been continuously and will be, and has been for a long time and certainly will be, getting worse. Their sky is lit up by bombs and missiles, and there's something I can't, and I know what you're saying, and I know I'm going to get abuse for having this conversation with you, because everyone will, you know, say that, you know, you're absolutely right with what you're saying. But as a mummy, I just think you're going to starve children. You're going to take babies out of their intensive care units and kill them when you turn off their electricity. They'll die. They're like days old, hours old, perhaps. And I've got goosebumps, and I don't know the answer. I wish that I did. I wish I could wave a wand and make it all go away and make it all stop, because I wish that there was peace. But I don't know, when I lay in bed and I think of those children getting starved, I can't. And then I hear everyone going, I unequivocally stand with Israel to do whatever it takes. As a mummy, that just breaks my heart.
It's not just about being a mother, Michelle, it's about being human. And, you know, that's why I think Joe Biden has been wise. I think Rishi Sunak has also said, you know, we hold you to uphold humanitarian. You know, there are rules, there are laws in war, and there is no doubt there is a war going on, and you should try and protect civilians. To cut off water and supplies of food and fuel is just inhuman.
I don't think anybody is advocating that Israel should be doing these things to hurt or kill civilians.
But they are.
No, they're not. They're doing
but these... But they know what's going to happen.
Nobody is advocating that Israel do these things to kill civilians. They're saying that Israel... People like myself saying Israel needs to do currently whatever it needs to do to try and bring the hostages home and secure the security of its own people from Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation, which has already flouted international law, by the way, by breaking into Israel and murdering babies, pregnant mothers.
Yes, absolutely. We've heard all of that. We don't...
Yet, within a week, we're downplaying it.
No, we're not downplaying it. We're not downplaying it.
Downplaying what?
We're not downplaying the very real humanitarian crisis that is affecting and is being faced by at least 1 million.
I think everybody agrees that this is a disaster.
Well, every time people say, you know, unequivocally, we support Israel to do what it is necessary. There has to be a but. You must.
No, sometimes when you're dealing with an organisation that in its founding charter is committed to the destruction of Israel and the genocide of Jews, which is in Hamas's founding charter, you're not dealing with a rational actor. You're dealing with a terrorist organisation that is intent on killing every Jew it can get its hands on.
And some people would argue that Israel is going to expunge the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and take it over.
Well...
And some people call that ethnic cleansing.
What do you think? Over to you at home. See you at 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Mark Goodwin alongside me, as is Joe Phillips. The conversation again in the break rumbled on. I was going to talk about prisons tonight, but I'm going to save that one for tomorrow so that I can do it justice with its time. An awful lot of people are very unhappy with what I was just saying about saying that my concerns about the children of Gaza and all the rest of it. They're saying, have you forgotten? Have you all forgotten what Hamas did? And why is it relevant that you're a mummy? And that's the point that you just made as well to me in the break. You're asking, are you suggesting that fathers don't feel empathy and all the rest of it? And is that even a relevant point to make? Wasn't it?
Well, I mean, I'm a father, but I can empathise with the points you make, but I think we are already within 7 or 8 days of the attacks on Israel, I would argue, losing some perspective.
And this is the view that you've just shared is absolutely echoed throughout my inbox. Piers is saying nothing to do with being a mummy. Any rational adult would say that this is wrong. But basically what you're saying, Piers, is this is just a terrible byproduct of having to defend yourself. Many people are saying, Michelle, anyone that feels like you, what would you feel? What would you want to do if anyone murdered your child in their own beds? Craig from Bradford says, Michelle, the simple fact is, if Hamas hadn't entered Israel and done this, they wouldn't have to now be sitting talking about a humanitarian crisis. So many of you have that feeling. Michelle, basically, yeah, well, I can't read some of those choice words out at tea time. But yeah, who's this? Jude. Michelle, I'm so disappointed. What Hamas did was a terrorist deliberately killing children and all the rest of it. Again, to your point, Matt, nobody as of yet has come up with, you know, if you feel perhaps like what I do about the children in Gaza, what is your answer then? Matt poses a very important question. I can give it to you as homework tonight. What is a proportionate response then? If someone comes along and they're bombing children and murdering children in their beds, it's all well and good criticising the response, as I am in part doing. But Matt's question is a fabulous pertinent one, and I'm going to end on it. What is then a proportionate response? You can tell me. But for now, Joe, thank you very much for your insight. Thank you. Your first time on the panel. Hopefully it's not going to be your last. And thank you to you guys at home. I've got to say, there's not many people backing the BBC. Lots and lots of you getting in touch saying that you want them absolutely immediately to start calling Hamas what you think and what, in fact, they absolutely are, which is terrorists. But for now, that's all I've got time for. Nigel Farage is up next. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you tomorrow. Night-night.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Things pretty calm out there at the moment, but through this week, it's going to turn very wet and very windy with the potential for some significant disruption from this area of low pressure that this morning here at the Met Office, we named Storm Babbitt. It's moving northwards, bringing a lot of moisture, slow-moving bands of heavy rain likely to cause some problems. We have a number of Met Office yellow warnings in place. Out there this evening, though, it's the calm before the storm. A fine night, actually. With clear skies, it'll turn quite cold across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. A touch of frost possible here in rural spots. Further south, a bit more cloud and the breeze picking up as we go through the night. Going to turn quite blustery at times over southwest England, north and west Wales during Tuesday. So some gusty winds here. Quite a lot of clouds spilling up from the southwest. Some showery rain possible for Devon, Cornwall, maybe later on into Pembrokeshire. A few showers continuing over the Northern Isles, maybe one or two getting into the east coast of England as well as the breeze picks up here. But for many, it's a dry and a fine day. Will be a bit of a chilly one. Again, temperatures generally a touch below average for the time of year and feeling colder as the winds start to pick up. The winds will strengthen further. However, it's the rain that we're most concerned about here at the Met Office for the rest of this week. A number of warnings are in place. Do check out our website for the details on all of those.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified.